Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Good afternoon, sir.
Good
Good
Yes, sir.
afternoon,
afternoon.
sir.
Okay, fine. So you can all hear me clearly.
Afternoon,
Okay,
sir.
good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay, hope you all have had a good lunch. So I asked you to come for a class at 2 today. So hope you've all had your lunch. All right, so let's start the class uh, for the files. This will be the last class for your file handling. Okay, so if you look at the board, I have written down some stuff here. So these are the basic operations and the basic functions that you need to remember to, perform basic operations with file. The first thing, just a revision of what we have done in the previous class, that's yesterday. In order to work with files, in order to do some reading and writing from into a file, we need to first create a file pointer. How do we create a file pointer? By writing the statement which is shown on the board. The most important thing after you actually declare a file pointer, what exactly does this file pointer does? It is basically a handle to connect to a file to a stream. So using the file pointer, using the pointer variable, which is of the type file, we will be actually, reaching to the file on which we need to perform some kind of read and write operations. The second important function which is really important is the f open, which is the file open. Now this function basically helps you to open the file, right? It also helps you to either create the file, and also important is that the mode in which you open the file, right? If you want to open it in the write mode, or you want to open it in the read mode, or if you want to open it in the append mode, you have to specify the various modes in this function. So this is the sequence in which your file handling has to be done. First, you declare a file pointer. Second, you open the file that you want to actually work with. And then, depending on whether you want to read or write, that also depends on the mode in which you have opened, right? You can either write to a file or read from a file. So if you want to write to a file, we have covered this simple function in yesterday's class, and that function is fputs. What it does, it basically takes the data that you want to write onto a file. So this data is here. This is basically nothing but a character array that we had discussed in our program yesterday. So it takes this data and it writes it onto the file, right, which is being pointed by the pointer PTR. So that's the PTR which we have declared, and this PTR is pointing to a specific file, and the name of the file I have mentioned in my fopen function. So the pointer is pointing to some file which is actually been, opened or created using the fopen function, because this PTR is equal to fopen when the fopen returns the address of the file which you have opened or created. So PTR holds the address of the file. So whatever data you want to write onto a file, you need to use the fputs data. You need to give the handle, that is the PTR, or the pointer which is pointing to the file, and the data which you want to write onto a file. So this is pretty much simple. And you also know that in order to free up all the resources, we need to free up the resources, cut our connection with the stream, clean the buffer. We need to use fclose PTR. PTR is what? PTR is basically the address or the pointer which is pointing to a specific file, right? Other than that, if you have to read from a file, we need to use another function which we have not yet discussed, which we are going to do it today, and that function is called as fgets. So fputs writes onto a file, and from that file, whatever has been written onto it using fputs, we can read it by using the fgets method. Okay, what does fgets method accept as parameters? Now, contrary to fputs accepts two parameters, that is data and PTR, whereas the fgets accepts three parameters: data, size, and PTR. Now, what exactly are these three parameters? Data is basically the variable. It's basically the variable which basically accepts the values which come from a file. So if you have a file and you're reading the contents of a file, then this is happening through a stream, right? So when you're reading the contents of the file, these contents are actually getting transferred across the stream into your program. So you need a container where you want to actually store that data. So this is the data that I have used here as a container. So data will be some character array, right, which will be an array which will store this data which is coming from the file, which is being read from a file. PTR is basically the handle to that file. Basically, PTR points to a specific file which you want to read. So this is quite clear because we have PTR here, we have PTR here. But the third one is the size. This size specifies the size of that particular, suppose a file can have like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of characters, but this size, you know, basically defines what is the size of character that you want to read. So if you want to read like 10 characters, you need to specify 10 as the size here. Okay, so this is basically a very simple, you know, concept of file handling, how you can open a file, how you can close a file, how you can read from a file, and how you can write to a file. Okay, now if you look at the example that we discussed yesterday, right, this was pretty much simple. Now in order to read from a file, all we need to do is we need to change this mode, right? So from the write mode, we need to change this mode to the read mode. Okay, and how do you change it from the write mode to the read mode? It's very simple. W is for write. We need to change this to R, which is the read mode. Okay, and then it's very important to check this particular line of code. This line of code basically tells you whether the file opening was successful or not, because in case if there's an issue with the file opening, it will return this particular function fopen returns null. So if you see that the pointer variable has been initialized with a null value, that means the file did not open properly. And we can actually have a demo of this. Okay, and then we write this 2 line of code. I mean, this is not necessary, but you can just take 1 line of code here, which is going to write some data into the file. We are writing this fputs with a new line character so that the next time you write something onto a file, it will not merge with that line, but it will come to the next line. And this will also be helpful when you're reading the file. Okay, so that's it. So in case you want to write a program to read a file, what we need to do is all this remains the same, except the mode will change here, right? And after that, you need to write, in place of the fputs function, you need to write fgets. Okay, and you need to specify 3 different arguments. So if you're going to read from a file, you don't need this line of code because this is not required. So you can create a data array. You can create an array which is going to be initialized later with the contents of a file. So when you write fgets, right, the first argument in that fgets will be this data which you're going to pass. This is the variable where the contents of the file is going to be written. The second is what is the size. Normally, whatever is the size of an array here, you mention the size so that whatever is the size of your variable, all the contents from a file will get filled into that variable. And the third one is the handle to that file, which is basically our PTR here. Okay, so it's very simple, right? So I just want to know if you have understood what I have told you, because today I'm going to show you a demo of these 2 read and write operations. So I can actually, I have already written the same program which as mentioned here, right? So I have written it in my editor, and we can actually run and see how it works. So any questions so far? If you have any queries, I can address them, and then I can actually show you how this program runs. So just give me a quick yes, no. I mean, if you have any queries or anything like that, can you just quickly respond?
No, sir.
Yeah, everything's okay?
No, sir.
You're ready to go and
Yes,
check
sir.
the code? Okay, fine, great. So let me just close this part of my screen, and we will go to my editor, and we will see exactly how, you know, this program runs. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. Now I'm trying to connect to my editor. Just give me a moment. I'm not too sure whether you can see the size of the fonts. Can you see this? Are you able to see the screen with my?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Great. Is the text clear? Are you able to see what I've written? Is the text
Yes,
clear?
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Great. Great. All right. Fine. So let's have a demo of this particular code. Right. I have just written it before the class today. Now, first important thing, I have written two programs here, and if you look at the folder where I have written these programs are in the desktop. I've added a folder called as my program, and inside my program, I have written two files. Okay. Everybody can see that clearly.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah, you can see these files,
Yes,
right?
sir.
These two files are here in my folder. Okay, great. Now, let's go back to the code. So the first code that I have here is filewrite.c. Okay. Now, in this code, it's exactly the same program which we did yesterday. First, what did we do? I have declared a file pointer, right? Then I have declared a character array. So this is an array of characters, and I have initialized with hello, how are you? The exact text which we discussed yesterday, right? And I've given a size 30, just a rough size I've specified here. Hello, how are you? Right? So that's my objective of this program, is to write to a file. And in the next line of code, what I've done is I have used the fopen function, and I have given a name of a file called myfile.txt, and I have specified the mode as write mode. Now what's going to happen is, if there is any file here, it will overwrite the contents of the file, but we don't have any file in this folder, right? So this file does not exist. So what's going to happen, according to the definition of the write mode, it is going to create a new file for me. Okay, and it will create the new file, and my objective is to save this or write this content, that is hello, how are you, into that new file. So before we actually start writing the code for the new for the write operation, we first check whether the file was created successfully or not, and the file opened successfully or not. So that's an easy check. This should be there with every file handling code. Check for whether PTR is equal to null or not. And if PTR is not null, that means this line of code was successful, right? So what happened? We will get into this else part. And what's going to happen in the else part? This line is very, very clear. We're just going to print that the file is open now. This makes sense because, we did not get into this loop. And this is the line of code which is going to write this data. So fputs, we know fputs, right? What it does, it will take the data which you have declared as a array here. So what is the content of the data? Hello, how are you? So it is going to take the content of this variable. In this case, the variable is a character array, and it is going to write to the file which is being pointed by PTR. So which is that file which is being pointed by PTR? Here, the PTR is pointing to my file.txt. All right, everybody's clear with this? And then I'm just printing a message saying that data is successfully written in the file, and we again go back and close the file. So how do we close the file? You use fclose function, and you pass the PTR which is pointing to this my file.txt. Okay, and then the file is closed. That's a simple function. So I'm just going to show you that right now. I'm refreshing this folder. If you see that there is my file write.c, this is the file that we were discussing right now, right? Now I'm going to compile this program. So let's see what happens. So I go to execute and I compile. There shouldn't be any error because I've already checked it, right? Before I started the class, everything's okay. So I get, it's still compiling. So let's wait. This is the first time I'm compiling. So let's wait. Okay, I got no errors, right? So you can see that there are no errors. Now, if I go back here, right, you will realize that a new file has been created. And I think you all know by now that what's happening here. So I have an executable file here for the same file write.c. I have an exe file called file write.exe. Okay, now I can run this executable file. Now I have an exe file. I can run it from everywhere. I don't need the dev C++ or anything. I can just straight away double click on this and run it, right? Or the second option that you all of you do it is you go and execute run. So when you execute run, all it does is it double clicks on that particular exe file and opens it for you. Now something worth noting here is that there is no file, the text file that we are trying to create here. But once I execute it, let's run it. So here is okay, so you can all see that now this program has run and we have got a message. The file is now opened. What does it mean? It means that it did not enter this loop. It did not enter this loop. That means this message was printed, which basically specifies that this has worked fine because the PTR value is not null, right? So this line was printed. That means PTR value was not null. So apparently my program is successful. And I have also got a message which I had written that the data was successfully written into a file. So here is that message. So it executed this line of code and it also closed the file. So it also executed this line of code. Now let's go back and see whether the file is created or not. So can you see this new file which has been created? All of you are able to see it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So a new file has been created now, okay, and everything's worked absolutely fine. So if you go back to the code, what was the name of my new file? What was the name of the file? My file was myfile.txt, right? And exactly the same file name has been created. Now let's open this. So I'm right clicking on it and I'm opening it. Notepad, you can open anything, Notepad or TextPad. Let's say TextPad. What is my content? Can you all see this?
Yes,
Can you
sir.
all see? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what you see here is what we had actually, written onto this file. So hello, how are you is written onto this file. So ours, we are successful in writing onto a file. Okay, now what I'm going to do here is my file is already present now. Okay, my file is already there. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this. Let's say I am successful. So I am running this program again. So let me copy this. So I'm going to show you what happens when this file is already present and you're trying to write to a file. So what should actually happen? The text which is written in my file.txt should be overwritten, right? So if the file exists, it will overwrite the text which already exists in that particular file from before. So I'm changing the text so that we know exactly whether the overwriting was successful or not. So I've just changed this piece of code by changing the content, and then I need to save it. So I've done Control S to save it, and I am compiling it again. Okay, so there shouldn't be any error because I've not done anything else. Let's increase the size of the window. So here we go, no error. And now I'm going to run this. So let's run this. So I run this. So now what happened? This program successfully executed. Now let's go back and have a look. So let me close these two windows. Let's go back. So this file is still here. Let's open and see what's the content in it. So I open and let's open using TextPad. And can you see what happened here?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so what happened?
Yes, sir.
My previous content is lost, isn't it? My previous
Yes.
content is lost. So I don't have my previous content here. So the problem here is, since I opened the file in the write mode, the previous content is lost. So that's the reason if I want to append something onto a file, that means if I want to append something onto a file, then I need to change the mode. Okay, so which is the mode which will append into a file and not overwrite it? So the mode that I had told you yesterday was A. A means append. Okay, so this mode is not going to overwrite the content of a file, but it is going to append it. So let's change this and write, right? So I have just given it another text here, and I'm going to run this program again. So let me just compile this, right? No errors. Now I'm going to run it. So I ran it. Everything fine, no issues, right? Now let's go back to this file. Now see, what happened was this file was already open, right? This file was already open. So it gave me a message that there was an application has updated this file. That means something has been written. So do you want to reload it? So I will say, yes, I want to reload it. So when I reload it, what happened? This is not overwritten. Now the contents of the file says, I am successful or am I not? Did you understand this?
Yes,
Did you
sir.
understand? Okay. Everybody clear with what's happening
Yes,
here?
sir.
Sure. Everybody's understanding?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. Brilliant. So now what I'm going to do is, this is fine. So the writing part is fine. So no, we know how to write onto a file. Okay. We know how to write onto a file. So let's go to the read program. Look at the read program. Now what I'm showing you is the program on how to read from the file. So it's very simple. Let's go through this. Now in this case, we are going to read from the file. So I'm using the same file name, okay, which has some data into it. Or you want me to just, show you that. Let's remove this first. Let's remove this file altogether. So I don't have this myfile.txt. Okay, I don't have myfile.txt at all. Now let's see this. What I've done, the first line of code, declaring a file pointer. No need to worry about it. In the second line of code, I have declared a character array of 30 size. Now what's going to happen is, this is the variable, this is the array where the contents of the file are going to be stored. Okay, this is the array which will actually take the contents, and I will put it into this, and then I will print this array and see whether the contents have come from the file properly or not. So this, in this case, I'm going to read, so I don't need to initialize this array. I just need to just keep it empty. Now this is very simple, but here the only difference is I am writing the mode. I'm changing the mode to R. What does R signify? It means that I'm going to read from a file. Earlier we used R to write, A to append, but here I'm going to read from a file, right? Now the first question here is, I need to check whether my file opened correctly or not. If my file opened correctly, then what I should do, I should come back here and use the fgets function. What does fgets function take? So first it takes read data, because this is the variable where the data which is going to come from a file, which you're going to read from a file, we're going to store it. So read data I have initialized here as an array. So in this case, this read data is empty. It's an empty array, not initialized with any. I've just given the value 30 here, and the same value you should specify, because the size of the array and the size of has to be, I mean, it need not be same, but if you have declared it as an array of size 30, and if suppose your text is 30 bytes long, and if you specify here only 5, then what will happen is half of only your 5 characters will be displayed. Okay, and then PTR is basically the handle to the file. That's basically the file which we are pointing to. So in this case, the PTR is pointing to myfile.txt. And once we do this, all I need to do is print this, right? So I'm just going to print read data, because read data now, after writing this line of code, the contents of the file would have been initialized into this array read data character array. So if I just print %s, means a string, right, from this character array read data, I should basically get the contents of the file in my program. All right, now if I run this program, let's compile it. So compiled, fine, no problem. I think it's no problem. Let's check this. Okay, there's no error, right? So it's compiled fine. Now if I run this, what's going to happen? Who's going to tell me quickly? What's going to happen if I run this particular program? What's going to happen?
Sir,
It's not going to throw an error, but hopefully it should print that my file does not exist, because I don't have the file in my folder, right?
yes, sir.
Yes, all of you can, all of you agree,
Sure.
right? That I don't have the file. I deleted that file. I just deleted that file. So that file doesn't exist. So if I try to run this code, it'll try to open the file, but since it's opening in the write mode, it's not going to create a file, because creation of a file is done only when you're writing onto a file. So in the write mode, it will try to open that file. It will search for that file in the current directory. It will not find the file. So what is the value which is going to be returned? The value that is going to be returned is going to be null. So the PTR value is going to be initialized with null, and this loop is going to get, this condition is going to get executed. That means my file.txt does not exist. It will not go into this else part at all. So let's see whether that happens or not. So here I compiled it. Let's do it once again. Okay, here I'm going to execute it. So here I run, and look what message I get. My file.txt does not exist, which is what should happen, right? So because this file actually doesn't exist here, right? Everybody's okay with this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now let's
Yes,
create
sir.
that file. So what I'll do, I'll just take my previous program, file write.cs .c. Let me change this. My file is ready. So let's put this content. Let me compile this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this. So let's run this program. Okay, this file is successfully created. Let's go and check. Is my file ready? Yeah, my file.txt is there. And let's open it. We have a content. Yes, my file is ready. So I have a file which exists now with some content in it. All right. Now let's go to my file read function. Now in this case, when I run this file, this program, it is not going to enter this loop because it will find the file there now. So my file.txt exists. So it's going to find it, right? And PTR will be assigned the address of that location, and then this will work. So file get should work now. So let's run this program. So now when I run it, look at it. My file is now opened. That means null, sorry. So we did not encounter PTR is equal to null. So this piece of code was not executed, but what executed was this line. The file is now opened. And after that, we were successful with the fgets. So the contents of the file was read by fgets, and then it was put into read data, and we printed the read data in this line of code. And after that, the data successfully read from a file. So look at it, exactly the same thing has happened. Now the file is now opened and my file is ready. Now this is the content which we got from this file. Here, my file is ready. So we were successfully able to read the content from the file. Yes, so everybody okay with this program that we just saw?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will share these
Yes, sir.
programs with you. So,
Yes, sir.
okay, so this is how you need to, write programs. Simple, very simple programs. I've written it in a very simple way. I've made it absolutely clear without adding any of the complexities. I'm not doing anything here, but I've just written the line of code which is basically required for understanding the concept of file read and write. I'll share this code with you in the Google Classroom as a material. Okay, so this is it for your file handling. All right, so that's all that is there for your syllabus. So what we're going to do now is, since your syllabus is completed today, we will be doing certain things. I will need 1 or 2 days of time, but before that, before I go ahead with my plan for the future, let me just ask you whether you guys have understood whatever I have taught you over these last few days. If you have any queries, you can ask me. Okay, and if you don't have any queries, then I will share my plan of what we're going to do next, because we have eventually gone through each and every bits and pieces of your syllabus, and I have tried and explained them in the most simplistic form. So do you have any queries, or do you have anything to share with me right now, or I can continue with what for the plan for future? Anybody has anything to share with me, or I should
Sir, can you
continue?
show that previous program?
Yeah, you want to see the previous program?
Yes,
Okay,
sir. Yes.
fine. All right, so let me. Okay. So here is the previous program. So the file read, right?
Yes, sir. So
Okay.
that null should be a capital if PTR
Yes.
equal to null.
Yes, the null should be in capital. Okay.
Yes, sir.
It's
Okay.
advisable to write null in capital. It's advisable
Yes,
to
sir, because
write
it
null
was
in
taking
capital.
error. I read
Yes.
that.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Fine. So just give me a minute. Okay, let me stop the recording because unnecessarily it'll pick up a lot of stuff.